esteemed member of the Buffalo Bills community. Thank you and all of you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Under Review. That red light is on, which means we are ready to go. My name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter at show_DeRosa. Tonight's episode name is Shogun because the beloved series Shogun is coming to a conclusion, and you bet your sweet bippy I will be watching the finale of it right after the show ends, as I do all my post-show stuff. And speaking of the show, we got a great one for you tonight, folks. We are going to be talking about our 5 favorite options for the Bills at pick 28, or maybe in the first round if you think trades are a possibility, that are not receivers, because I do think it is important that we discuss the other amazing prospects that could be there for this team in general. If you want to follow along with the conversation, feel free to in the comment section below. Joining me tonight are my 2 friends and draft correspondents, Mr. Thomas DeLuss and John Helmkamp, as we will navigate this board in the final episode before the NFL draft. I am so excited. But without further ado, everybody, let's go.
Previous play will go under review.
The intro is over. The show is ready to roll. Thomas is here, and this is going to be a fun episode. Thomas, welcome back. I'm happy to have you here. I appreciate you joining me. How you doing?
I'm good. I spent the afternoon driving all over the place, including seeing one Greg Thompson today, which every day is better when you see Greg Thompson. So I'm good. I'm ready to roll. I'm excited. I'm just chomping at the bit to get to Detroit, and I know all of us Bills fans, just sheer excitement heading into this Thursday.
Absolutely, man. Yes, for those that might not be aware, Thomas, myself, and John, who will be joining us shortly, are headed to Detroit to cover the draft firsthand on all of Cover One's platforms. So if you follow any of us on Twitter, we will be posting about everything we can, as well as to the main handle, and we are really, really looking forward to it. And I'm really looking forward to this episode because we've been talking about wide receivers nonstop, which relates to RJ's comment here. RJ, ever so optimistic about other positional groups on this team, says, after watching millions, and millions of mock drafts over the past 2 months, I think if they don't pick a wide receiver with their first pick, the Bills are cooked. Wide receiver 1, Curtis Samuel, ... RJ, I love your enthusiasm, your optimism. It is always so appreciated. I understand the sentiment. I'm only messing with you. And Brandon, friend of the show, says, listening to Under Review while doing term papers, who got it better than me for real? Brandon, the answer to that is everyone, because you're doing term papers. That sounds terrible. I hope this show can help you get through that, though, because I understand essays suck. But oh, I like this comment too. Fisky and Sweat, we need to get younger in the trenches. Wide receivers still good in third round like Shakir. This comment came right before RJ's comment, which tells you the state of the fan base when we talk about the draft and talk about all of the different positions and how everyone evaluates this team, their perception of the team, and what the biggest needs are. We have spoken about wide receivers. We have spoken about everything. But I felt like last week's episode where I was talking about positional groups that were the biggest needs made me want to do this one because there are a lot of options for the Bills at 28. And should this team maybe make a trade that isn't a draft style trade, but rather for a player directly, or decide that they value wide receiver prospects a little bit later on in this draft, well, that would mean that 28 is wide open for a variety of positions that are all needs. So Thomas, let's get into the nitty gritty of this episode and start with our number 5s here. Who is your 5th favorite option? And we're going from 5 to 1. If it wasn't obvious already. 5th favorite option for the Bills at pick 28 or in the first round in general.
In the first round, I would say if this was a guy and everything fell sideways and there was no other options, I would say it would be very strange for them to do this, but it'd be something like an Audric Estime, a running back that is just a stud. Audric, I mean, he's not going to go in the first, right? But Audric Estime as a talent, and I'm going a little off skew, so not exactly the first, but if they traded back, this is a guy I think the Bills would be incredibly interested in. He fits every necessity that they need. didn't test well at the combine. So numbers, they don't jump off the chart, which is not really an issue to me because there's a lot of talent in the draft that, when it comes to testing and game tape don't match. And that's fine. Because to be honest with you, I much prefer if they show up on game day and they're a stud, I'm a little bit more, behind, and proponent to them being on the field. So with Audric Estime, a guy that in size 5'11", 221 pounds, he is a mastodon of a human being in terms of what he can provide you. He gives thorough power. He is a guy that in between the tackles is going to destroy a defense for you. And that's the type of running back that you need to spell James Cook with. James Cook, who's going to be going into potentially a banner year for himself, came off a breakout season this past year in 2023. Audric Estime is exactly what they wanted Latavius Murray to be, a guy that when you need to take Josh Allen from being that bruising running back that he likes to be, you put Audric Estime in that moment, and he's going to be the one being the force in the middle.
I love Estime as a prospect, and I was one of those people who kind of bit into the sentiment about the running back class being weak, and therefore I wasn't really keen on taking one. And then I did my due diligence. I started exploring some prospects, watched a few, but really it was more reading because I was focusing more on defense, D-line, wide receiver, all of them. And what I found was that I think when you look at it through the lens of the Bills specifically, there are a lot of options for them in this draft that make a lot of sense for being a secondary back to James Cook, with Audric Estime being one of them. I do love Estime. Again, when you talk about what you're lacking from this running back room and what the team really needs as far as archetype for running back, it's a true power guy. Now, you don't have to do it this way, right? Like if they decided that they didn't want to use a pick on running back, they want to go 1 and 2 with Cook and Johnson, I literally could understand why it would make sense and then just fold a 3 with whoever's there. But I think getting a young power back you can control for 4 years, most likely 4. I don't think they're going to get one in the first round. I don't think there's a first round valuation on any of them, but you get yourself a nice back that has that ability, or even if it's not just total conventional power back, but someone with a good frame that can make you plays, whether it's over the middle, whether it's going on the outside or bouncing off tackles, then I'm fine with it. And I think Estime is a great option. I also like Braylon Allen. I also like Shipley. Also like Dylan Johnson out of Washington. Like there are a lot of people, Bucky Irving, that I feel like fill the need for the Bills, and you can get them in a later round. So I do like that you kicked it off with that, because running back is a position that it's not like Bashawn Robinson last year where he was mocked to the Bills in every mock draft, or Jahmyr Gibbs was too. And everyone was talking about Bashawn Robinson at pick 27. And then he went at pick 8 and everyone got silenced. It was so funny in real time. I think now we talk about it as an afterthought, but it's a very real need still for the team. And I could see them doing it, which is why I'm totally on board with it. I'm totally on board if it's Estime in the 4th round, even if they got frisky, maybe they address receiver and they address D tackle, and you're not fine with the safeties on the board. And maybe you make a little bit of a trade and you go get yourself a Benson or a Blake Corum. If you want to get really crazy with that, I don't think that'll actually happen. But just hypothetically speaking, for the need, then I'd be fine with it. And you got to remember, this would be an instant contributor. They're going to be rotating in as a back on this team. I'd be all for it. Let's see what happens. But as far as my first round option for this, I'm going to go ahead and start off with, okay, so I was torn on this because I flipped 4 and 5 a few times. I actually have 4 on here, but I'm going to talk. I cannot speak. I have my 5 on here. I'm actually going to make my 4 and vice versa. So my 5 to pick here is Kool-Aid McKinstry. And here is my thing. This is if you're looking at it through the lens of running, I'm still on running back. Cornerback, David's in here. David, this is not a wide receiver savvy episode. We were talking about other positions, and it is not Latu. He's not on this list, actually, because I don't think he's going to be there at 28 anymore. But I went with Kool-Aid McKinstry for a few reasons. Rasul Douglas, we don't know if the Bills have plans to keep him beyond just this upcoming season, right? So with me, you're talking about the hopeful development of Kyer Elam. You are talking about potentially Christian Benford, who I love and think is a fine starter at the position, and then the depth behind it being pretty weak, and you would have to address it later on in the draft, which I trust McDermott and co to do. However, if you are telling me that, okay, the receiving board is dry, a lot of good options got picked, maybe they make the trade, maybe they're just willing to wait, and we want to go BPA. If McKinstry's there and there are other options on this list I have that aren't, I'm cool with it for a few reasons. I think that this is a guy that could be your Trey White, essentially a Trey White replacement. He's a good zone corner. He's got ball hawking ability. He's very instinctual, and he's very willing in every effort, whether that's in run defense or passing defense. There are issues with really sharp cuts I've seen from like guys like even McConkey, who are able to kind of expose him a little bit in space. And when it comes to lateral agility, they mess with him a little bit. But I feel like this can all be coached out of him. And I think McDermott and his defense, a zone defense looking for that corner, it's someone that I'd be willing to go for. And I'm really glad that Jay Will just dropped. Wait, hang on. This is a great comment. I didn't know there were other positions in the draft. That's excellent, William. Thank you.
There isn't.
There are not. It's receiver or bust, nothing else. But Jay Will, safety from Iowa, forgot his name, Cooper DeJean. So Cooper DeJean is an honorable mention for me. Why I decided to go for McKinstry over him is for the dedicated corner role, whereas I feel like DeJean's versatility is amazing. I'm fine with the pick. I would like it, but I think he'd be a little bit more of a safety than a corner. And for that, I like the value of taking a corner at the spot over a potential safety, even if he is a guy who can move around. I get the value. I'm for it, but I want to be focused with corner if it's going to be a pressing need if you lose Douglas. So for those reasons, I am cool with Kool-Aid. I think he's a McDermott guy. I think he played in a pro-style defense. I know that's a silly term, but like he played for Bama, man. He played under Saban. Like it's a guy that I can get down with, someone that I'd be happy they took. Again, if the circumstances aligned, and for this exercise, he's my number 5. Thomas, I've been rambling. What you got for number 4 or any other options?
So I like Kool-Aid McKinstry. I think that's a really nice option for the Bills. I'd be stunned if they went corner, unless there's some serious concern with the length in which Russell Douglas is going to be here. If they don't believe in Kaiir Elam still, which I don't know. I don't know what to think about what Kaiir is. That's a work in progress. But I think it's definitely interesting to think about the potential there. My number 4, David, is Laiatu Latu. And the reason I put him there is, one, kind of in that same breath, I don't think he's going to ever get to 28. No. In fact, if John was actually here, which apparently he didn't want to join us tonight, I don't know if he actually didn't want to, so don't take my word for that. But I have been banging the table in Laiatu Latu. I think he would be the person, but first, he'd be the perfect person to be an understudy to Von Miller. He has incredible bend, great technique, really, really high motor, great hands. And I know in terms of Laiatu Latu, there's the fear of the unknown of the injury, which, let me say this, and this is across the board with anything, right? Any player that you're concerned with injuries, the Bills have done their due diligence on, period. Mm-hmm. Whether it's a draft prospect, a free agent, a trade, anything, they always check when it comes to medicals. So you can bet that if he's coming in here and they draft Latu, they feel 100% just comfortable that he is healthy. And with what he's gone through, he went to the same specialist that Peyton Manning went to for the same fusion surgery. So he obviously feels very comfortable. He's played the past 2 years, very good production. He is the type of player that with the Bills, he becomes your 1A. Because and this is nothing against Greg Rousseau. I banged the table last year for Greg Rousseau. I said Greg Rousseau was going to have a 14, 15 sack year. Didn't happen. Mm-hmm. I'm still waiting on it. I'm hoping it happens. But until that, I see Greg Rousseau as that elevated Shaq Lawson, really good edge defender, has a couple really nice pass rush attempts throughout the year, but he's not the Von Miller-esque type that we think he was supposed to be at this point, right? Mm-hmm. He's not going to be the guy that's going to destroy a game plan. Whereas I think Latu has the potential of being and I still think Von Miller has this chance to be, we'll see what happens this year, but I think Latu has the chance to be that 1A game-wrecking, get after, Patrick Mahomes or whomever you're playing, and, be that fourth quarter kind of just game-deciding player that what we really need on the edge. On top of that, the one thing about Latu, he's a big dude. I don't know if most of you know, but he's 6'5", 259 pounds. He has an arm. He's got a reach of 32 and 5/8 inches. He is a very large individual. So it's very similar to what happened with Leonard Floyd and Greg Rousseau. You would have two very lengthy, very kind of Stretch Armstrong style guys on the outside, which helps in terms of, run support, helps really kind of blanket the outside, keeps the quarterbacks in the pocket. And then you would see the potential of Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones, where you're forcing the 1-tech, 3-tech up and you're pushing the centers and guards. And so what he provides is such an impact type of thing. But beyond that, you have an heir apparent to a defense that dramatically needs that impact defensive end.
Yeah, I love Latu dearly. The only reason I didn't put him on this list is because I was trying not to psych myself. Even then, there's probably still a couple names on here that by 28 might be gone. I just feel like Latu is someone that I think the medicals are going to be overblown, and he could wind up being gone at 15 or 16. And yeah, again, I might say a name and someone's going to scratch their head and be like, wait, but you said you don't think Latu's going to be here, but this guy would. And it's you're fair to say that, but Latu, I also love dearly. I think he's the most complete pass rusher. I think when you talk about a tactical understanding of the position and how to win, because he has the size to win, right? If he wants to use power, he can use power, but he also can use his hands, but he can also use his feet. He can use different methods to get around, whether that's some form of chop, whether he's got a bullet, whether he's got a spin. There's a method to his madness where he can understand the matchup and attack it. And I think for that reason, if the neck wasn't a thing that people were talking about, it wouldn't even be a question that he'd be a top 10 pick regardless. But I think it's not, unless the medicals are really that scary that someone says, oh my God, I can't do this, it's way too much of a risk in 5 years, then fair enough. And if he fell to 28, then that would tell me that that's a bigger concern than people are making it out to be. And for that reason, I would understand if the Bills were he's a great prospect, but can we really do this right now? So I would say that's valid, but I love him as a prospect. I love that suggestion. Latu is an absolute monster. And Justin with a super chat. Thank you so much, Justin. We appreciate you. And he says, no thanks. We have dealt with the neck fusion injury. And that's a fair concern. And I get why fans would be off put by a Latu pick. I think it's one of those things where you have to kind of trust that like you alluded to, Thomas, this organization would have done their due diligence and said, hey, we're really comfortable with how he's progressed. He was, retired a few years ago, came back, played a full healthy season. How has the wear and tear on this injury been since he's gotten the surgery? And if it really has been insignificant, I feel like if they took him, it was because they had full faith in the medicals. And if that bites him in the ass, let it be after 4 years where you got a guy that's getting 10 plus sacks every year. And to your point, Thomas, too, Gregory Rousseau, I think, was really pacing to get a double-digit sack year, but another unfortunate injury kind of took him out of that momentum. I would like to see if he can maintain his health, and I think that edge is a need because of the concerns like that and the consistency of the position. So Latu was a great suggestion, and someone that had I had a little more faith he'd be there would be on my list. But Justin, thank you so much for the super chat. We really do appreciate it. Guys, we appreciate you watching. If you got here late, drop a like on this video if you like what we're saying. If you hate me, then you should drop a like anyway in a cool, ironic sense. That'll totally get me. Everyone will think you're the funniest person alive. So appreciate you all watching. Here is my number 4, and that is Graham Barton. Yes, Graham Barton, the Duke tackle, but also with a lot of versatility in his game. He is 6'5", 313 pounds. I had him written down, versatile OL prospect, insanely strong, very athletic, and can be your potential starter, not just at tackle if you decide to shore him up, maybe mold him into right tackle, because obviously Dawkins is maintaining left, even though he played left. But he also has background at center and in the interior offensive line and has the ability to slide into multiple positions. And this is one of those things where you talk about the construction of the room, right? And you talk about, and I've said this numerous times on the show, Thomas, we talk about Mitch Morse going, and now you slide McGovern to center, and now you have David Edwards as your starting guard, and you're asking yourself, will this work? And I say, for the people that are nervous, Aaron Kromer is a great coach, a great developmental coach. He can make a player good because he is one of the best OL coaches, in my opinion, in the league, and has improved the play of Spencer Brown, has made Osiris Torrance be able to maintain a quality play in his rookie season. Connor McGovern comes to the Bills and ends up having one of the best years of his career. It's not that I don't trust the process with that, but when you're talking about replacing Mitch Morse and you're talking about stability at the center position and a coach that could prop up a guy like Graham Barton, who has the athletic profile for Cromer, who has this ability to play center. This is a guy that I think if he's there for you at 28 and you don't like your board, this is someone that I would love it if they picked. I just think the potential is through the roof with him. I understand that there are some criticisms about like the length of his arms and how will he adapt to like NFL coaching when he's a versatile guy and might have to slide to one specific position. But this is a guy that if you had Cromer coaching him up to be your future center, I think he's got the build. I think he's got the athleticism. I think he's got the strength in both pass pro and run blocking downhill to be a guy that could really maintain that starting center spot, and is someone that I would love for them and is my fourth most desired prospect that isn't a wide receiver on this list. We are going to continue on, Thomas. I want to hear what you got next, but I'm going to intercept our conversation, just like Khalid McKinstry could intercept passes for the Buffalo Bills if they decided to take him, with a little message from our good friends, Greg Thompson and Aaron Quinn. Gentlemen, what do you got?
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
Yes, friends. Become one today. For just 60 gold doubloons, you can become a One Pass member, and the link is in the description below, as well as in the flowing ticker that will show you how to get there if you are curious. For just $60, you can sign up, become a member. That Cover One. One Pass is the lifeblood of our network. It allows us to have access to all of the resources that we use to provide you, the viewer, listener, reader, with all the content that we can, all the statistics, all the film. Plus, you would get access to the premium Slack channel, which is nonstop Bills discussion with some incredible people, very educated fan base. And if you are looking to talk about Bills football, that is the place to be. So I implore you all to sign up. It would be very well worth your time. And you can win a cool prize, including a PS5. That's a thing. You should check that out. Greg could tell you more about that. But let's move on. Thomas, let me hear your number 3 on this list.
I was going to say, for only $0.25 a day, you can sponsor a Cover One employee. So my number, what are we at? Number 4? Where are we at? Number 3? Number 3. My number 3 is Braden Fisk. A guy that was really heating up after the Senior Bowl, softened a little bit since then, but still, I think absolutely has a potential of being drafted at the back end of the first round. A guy that, like I said, at the Senior Bowl was, I think the talk of the town, was destroying offensive lines. I mean, going against, guys like Jackson Powers Johnson and putting him on his ass, doing things to, offensive linemen that most of the defensive linemen that showed up couldn't handle. And he was running through them. He, very similar to our guy, Kyle Williams from back in the day. Back in the day, God, that sounds horrific. From not too long ago, 6'4", 292 pounds. He has versatility to play, I think, both inside, outside. He's a little bit smaller. I know it's a bit of a concern, but he provides what I think what he lacks in size, he absolutely has in spades with his tenacity, his technique. It's just his first step, his twitch. His first step explosiveness is off the charts. And if you look at his testing, he was fantastic in every sense of the word.
Yep.
He's a guy that I think when it comes down to it, do I expect him and Ed to be on the field at the same time? No. I think you'd be asking for a lot of trouble, and teams probably looking to run right up the gut. But as a guy to spell at Oliver, I don't think you could do much worse. Much better, excuse me. He is absolutely the perfect, clone, the perfect, 1-2 punch with Ed Oliver. And to be honest with you, I think he screams process. He just screams Coach McDermott. And when you're looking at what the Bills want to do on defense, they are becoming a team that, one, provides versatility. I mean, you see it all across the defense. They are all about versatility. But on top of it, you're seeing they're trying to get fast. And that's really what it's coming down to, is a lot of teams are trying to become faster because most offensive players, whether it's tight ends, because tight ends are not your old, Tony Gonzalez, big burly tight ends, Mercedes Lewis, humongous guys. You got wide receivers that are running in the 4.3s, 4.2s, running backs that are becoming, lesser of the Brandon Jacobs and more of the James Cook catching out of the flat. You need more of an opportunity to get as fast as you can. And that's what Braden Fisk provides. He is another jack of all trades, versatile defensive lineman that you can play inside, outside, all over the place. And he has the chops to be able to get from sideline to sideline. He is that good of an athlete. He has that tenacity. And I think he literally fits exactly what Buffalo would love.
Yeah. Fisk is someone that I was able to watch one of the first DTs I watched, and I had to kind of refresh myself on his numbers again because I didn't remember if his height was the one I was mistaking with a different DT in mind. But no, he's 6'5". He's a big, giant dude and someone that could absolutely fill in that role if you're looking for rotation on either side of the tackles. If you're looking for someone to fill in for Daquan on a breather, if you're looking for Ed rotation and you need just like that pass rush juice, or just someone to maintain a quality level of play, then he's that guy. And I absolutely love this. I think he could fall into the second round, and I think there is a realistic path that the Bills could see him there at 60. I don't know how realistic, but I don't think he's a first rounder. I think there's a couple of other players I have above him as far as DTs, but I love Fisk. I love him. I would be very, very happy if the team did take him in the second round because I could see the vision with him. Because I think with him, there's a bit more of like now I have this guy that can plug in at both of these positions. And if either one of these guys goes down, I'm comfortable with him inheriting that role to start. And when you think about Daquan Jones, the 2-year contract, and the fact that life will have to go on after him someday in the league, who's a guy that you would like to fill in that role for the foreseeable future when the contract ends and this rookie contract is still active? Fisk is one of those options for me. So I'm very comfortable with taking him, whether if it is a first round valuation and they do really think that highly of him, or later on. I prefer it in the second, but maybe if they think like, okay, he's going to get picked at like 35, like maybe he'll be gone. That's fine. So I like that suggestion a lot. I do have a DT on this list. He's not my pick right now. I will get to him. It's probably freaking obvious. But my number 3, and I'm going to pull up Mr. Travis Tarr's picture because it's an interesting profile picture you got there. Was that the Penn State Lions, Nittany Lions? That's funny because my number 3 is Chop Robinson, weighing in at 254 pounds at the stature of 6'3". Chop Robinson at pick 28. If you address receiver in some way, shape, or form, so let's say that you take. Let's say there's a trade pulled, right? Let's say, okay, this IU trade is a thing. Like they want to make it happen somehow. Like they give up next year's first, they can somehow hold on to 28. Whatever your scenario is, because I know that's what Greg did on his mock draft. But Chop Robinson to me is a prospect I really, really like for the Bills. Even though there are some concerns about measurements and some concerns about maybe his size, even though he's 6'3" and he's got the athleticism at 250 pounds, it's one of those things where he feels like a raw, unfinished product. And the production profile obviously wasn't anything too insane, but you could see the ceiling for Chop Robinson, which I think is immensely high. Of course, I say this for a lot of people, but it's probably something I very much value in a lot of the prospects I like for the Bills, and that's him being highly athletic. Also, just, again, a bendy, explosive pass rusher, someone who, again, has a very quick first step, someone who is violent with his hands, even if he is a bit entropic with how he uses his hands, and someone that I have seen use a variety of methods to try and get to a quarterback, disrupt passing lanes, rush throws, really high potential guy. And I know that his stature, his build is similar to that of Mike Parsons. I'm not saying they're the same player, but rather another Penn State previous edge or outside linebacker, I guess technically, that you saw have a lot of success in the NFL. And I think that while I don't think Chop is the same level, I think Chop could be a very serviceable pass rush specialist for a Buffalo Bills team that needs the pass rush help. even though it is not a strong edge class, I do think it is a top-heavy edge class with that cutoff starting closely after Chop. And he's someone that if you were able to fortify, even if you weren't, let's say you don't fortify wide receiver right away, you decide that the second round and beyond is how you want to fill this room, and maybe you go with a more balanced approach, aka like what the Packers did, which, you know, the Packers took Lucas Van Ness in the first round and then took receivers and tight ends. So if you wanted to go that route, this is a guy that I think would be an automatic improvement to the room. You're talking about no longer having Leonard Floyd, maybe going and getting an edge rusher after June 1st. So instead of that, if you got this guy fall into your lap and you think that there's someone that you could maybe like, he's someone you could develop into reaching that ceiling. And if not, then his skill is still a very quality pass rusher, even if a bit unrefined or sloppy. This is a guy who would love to take there. I really do see the vision for Chop Robinson in the NFL, just with what he could be. It really, for fans alike, if it's not receiver and this is an option, you have to ask if you trust the development of, or the coaching and the development that could be happening to Chop if they take him. But I love him as a prospect, and for that reason, he's my number 3. So, Thomas, let's move on to your number 2. What do you got?
My number 2 is Tyler Nubin, safety out of Minnesota, a guy that has usurped a guy that most Bills fans know, Antoine Winfield Jr., as probably the best safety to come out of Minnesota. Just a promising prospect, a guy with all the intangibles, all the size, all the frame. I mean, he's literally everything you'd want. 6'1", 200 pounds, 32-inch arms, 77-inch wingspan. He's an absolute freak of an athlete. 4.6 40, not great, not super fast, but he is the type of guy. And if you look, Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, their 40s are right around the same speed. I know a lot of Bills fans would kind of be depressed seeing a safety go in the first round, and I'm not a huge proponent behind it. But the reason is, in this scenario, if the board falls goofy, right, and you see that, whether it's Brian Thomas Jr. and Adonai Mitchell and whomever, right, and you get to 28 and you have your selection of the 7th best wide receiver, right, and then maybe on the board you have the 5th best defensive tackle, and it's like, I don't know if it's Braden Fisk, but whatever defensive tackles come off the board or defensive ends, you are down to, you have the number 1 safety or the 4th best defensive end and the 4th best defensive tackle and 8th best wide receiver. I think it's a good situation to be in because you've got a guy that can back end take over your defense. And you saw Mike Jordan Poyer many times for this Bills defense were the best players on the team. They were the best players on the Bills in their defensive side of the ball. And that's what Tyler Nubin's been for almost his entirety of his college career. He is a guy that is absolutely every bit of the player you want. He is, he could play both strong safety. He could play, just in the box. He can lay the lumber. He's got kind of a tenacious side to him, but also super heady, very similar to Micah Hyde. He's elite skills in zone. He can also play man-to-man if necessary. And the biggest thing about him is his leadership. That is the one thing. He's been a three-year captain for Minnesota. So he's been a guy that has been looked upon for his leadership skills, but looked upon for his pure talent. He's also incredible against tight ends, which, in a team that consistently runs headfirst into the Kansas City Chiefs, having somebody that can play one-on-one with Travis Kelce, who we know, I know Saran Neal was the only option we had there, but in reality, such a terrible inside joke. There was nobody that could cover Travis Kelce. That was a stupid joke. Tyler Nubin has the chance to be that guy. He immediately impacts the team. He obviously would usurp a guy like Taylor Rapp. It'd probably be Mike Edwards and Tyler Nubin on the field. He's everything that I think, this team and just in general, Jamil Adai and Sean McDermott would love. They'd love having a guy that has pure talent, but is super heady, can step right in, right off the bus and play immediately, and automatically makes this team 10 times better than they are right now. Because you saw when Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer were at their best, this team was deadly. Because it makes first off, I know a lot of people say it starts up front, but it's a kind of a handshake type of thing with defenses. When you have good safeties and good corners, it makes your defensive ends and your defensive tackles jobs that much easier because really covering a wide receiver is like a 2 to 4 second window. But if you have a good safety and good corners that can give you an extra second, that extra second means everything to a quality defensive end. So having a guy like Tyler Nubin, I think is, I know a lot of Bills fans would balk at the idea of it initially. And, I don't know if a lot of you guys watch the Rockpile Report. I love those guys. They're hilarious. This past week, they had Nate Geary on. And I know Nate Geary is very polarizing. And some people like Nate, some people don't. But Nate said something that was very, very poignant. He said, "We are going to eat this shit up. At the end of the day, you are going to sit there and whatever player they draft, you are going to talk yourself into liking whoever it is, and you're going to find a way to enjoy have them being on the Bills. If Tyler Nubin happens to be the pick at 28, or they trade back to 36 per se, and Tyler Nubin is the perfect value point right there, you're going to find a way to love him. And I promise you, if you haven't watched his tape, do that. But you're going to find out very quickly that he is going to be one of your favorite players on the field."
I'm a huge fan of Tyler Nubin. I'm a huge fan of the sentiment when you talk about Poyer and Hyde being gone and now having to fill the void, and bringing up the fact that they were at a point probably the best players on your team, or defense, because best player on the team is Josh Allen. But what I will say is we are not used to a life after Poyer and Hyde. We have never lived it. Well, we've lived previous and it wasn't as fun. But now with McDermott, we haven't lived in that era, and we don't know what that's going to look like. So the validity of wanting a safety at 28 makes it makes total sense to want a safety there, because you are going to need to establish consistency at that position. And you had 2 All-Pros that you have to replace. That is no easy task. So when you're talking about how you want to attack the draft, there is a level of concern I have where it's how big of a drop off will the safety play be going into next season, whether you draft early, late, whatever, and how much of that safety play matters to McDermott, where they probably think that's such an important position to the structure of our defense, to the ability for our defense to be able to function normally, be able to manage, especially if they feel like they don't want to address the trenches on the defensive side of the ball, but rather the back end first. That's really the question I have, and something that I think makes sense when you talk about Tyler Nubin being an option there at the end of the first round. And I can understand it. I am someone who believes in building it in the reverse order and starting up front. I just think that when you have viable defensive line play, really stout pass rush, good run defense up front, muddy the lanes, make things hectic in the pocket, that is where, in my opinion, it trickles down into everything else. And you can make this argument like secondary to the front and talk about how back-end coverage will help a pass rush. It's really, what do you think matters more? To me, I like building up front. So while I love Nubin, and I have a bunch of safeties I really like for the Bills, he is one of them, obviously. Cam Kinchins, Javon Bullard, Cole Bishop, Jaden Hicks. There's so many names that I see it, I will get it, and I'll get the role right away. Because I think it was Spin in our chat who talked about, right here, Nubin can replace Hyde and Hicks would replace Poyer. I would be jumping for joy and sailing through the 7 seas without any life jacket if the Buffalo Bills drafted Jaden Hicks. I love Jaden Hicks. But what I'm going to say is I prefer to go up front first. And I think with those safety prospects I mentioned, as well as my faith in Sean McDermott's ability to develop back end secondary talent, and I know you could throw the argument, well, you just talked about offensive linemen and Cromer. However, I think I've seen more members of the secondary come into this defense and have success and be viable players versus offensive linemen, with Cromer only having a few members, and I would like to see more get developed because I also just value that position much more. I think for that reason, my number 2, I'm getting to it, I promise, isn't in the secondary. I like Nubin. I would be comfortable waiting on safety. I put Johnny Newton. And Johnny Newton, I understand, is basically Ed again. Basically Ed Oliver again. Not the same thing. I'm just saying for the fact that he's conventionally a 3 tech. Obviously, you could move him around if you want to, but he's 6'2", 304 pounds, considered undersized. So people would be like, why the hell did you put Johnny Newton at number 2? But then you just talked about Fiske later on. And Fiske could possibly be more of that profile for Daquan or fill in both. I love Johnny Newton for this reason. I think he's just such a good run defender, such a good pass rusher, plays so beyond his frame that it doesn't matter to me if he's 6'2", 304. I just think he's that good. And I think when you look at the structure of the Buffalo Bills defensive line, where your starter's Daquan Jones, and then at Oliver next to him, you'll probably have Rousseau, and then AJ Epineza, Von Miller rotates in. I feel like the opportunity for Newton as a rotational piece is not just something where you'd say, well, you'll just mix him in and he'll come in for when guys get breathers, but actually changing the structure of your defensive line's rotation where there is a never-ending sequence of pass rush ability and a threat to really disrupt your lanes, to really disrupt the structure of long developing pass plays, no matter what combination you have on the field, if you include a guy like him in a mix with Ed Oliver. And I think Johnny Newton's my second favorite. My first favorite is Byron Murphy. Byron Murphy is my favorite defensive player probably in this class, but there's no shot he'll be there. I think Newton has a chance to fall. Thomas, I am boring you to death. I am so sorry.
No, I'm so sorry.
I'm messing with you. I'm fucking with you.
Spent all day with a 1.5-year-old. You mentally just completely shot.
Yeah, no, I could totally understand. But like when it comes to Johnny Newton, if he, again, like I know people are going to say like he might not be there at 28. He very well might not be, even though I made that case for Latu before. I love him as a prospect. I see the vision. I could see very interesting fronts where maybe you have some semblance of Newton and Oliver together, Newton and Jones. Maybe you get really weird with it, put Rousseau in the middle, have Vaughn on the outside and Newton there. There are a lot of different ways that he could be used in this defense, despite the size, despite the fact that he really is more of an NFL 3-tech. And for that reason, with the fact that I just think he's a damn good player and very aggressive and adds that kind of attitude to the room while also being a great pass rusher and a great run defender, he's my pick at number 2 and someone I'd like. So, Thomas, we will get to the one. However, let's talk about some honorable mentions. Just some names you like that like maybe we didn't cover, maybe on my list, not on yours, or someone that we didn't talk about that you would like or at least consider at this spot, pick 28.
I mean, I would consider Xavier Legette.
Xavier Legette, Xavier Worthy, Lad McConkey, Troy Franklin, Adonai Mitchell, you know, just
any of the wide receivers. Yeah, I mean, I think Jackson Powers Johnson is one that I think legitimately you have to consider as the best offensive lineman, well, interior offensive lineman in this draft. You know, and a good friend of mine once told me, you take the best interior offensive lineman, whether it's a guard or a center, he'll be on your team for like 10, 15 years. And it's very, very often true. So, you know, you take Jackson Powers Johnson at 28, and I know it's not an attractive pick to some people taking a center there, but you have a spin. Everybody has character concerns. Everybody has injury concerns. Everybody has something right now. All this stuff is popping up out of nowhere. I haven't heard anything about JPJ this whole time, and now this stuff is popping up. Somebody told me today that Xavier Worthy has character concerns. I haven't heard anything of that. So, guys, this is the season where people are trying to tank people's draft position. So take everything you read with a grain of salt. Jackson Powers, the other side to this, let me preface this. If there's a team that you take a guy in, this is the team. You have good leadership. You have a quarterback who runs the locker room. You have a good head coach, a good general manager, good coaching staff, good players. Bringing in a guy, if he has some issues, is the time to do it right here. But Jackson Powers Johnson, you know, has proven he's one of the best at his position and has been very, very good for a majority of his career, and he'd be a great day one step-in starter. You know, you could put Connor McGovern back at left guard and David Edwards back on the bench as that 6th utility offensive lineman, which would be a perfect position for him. Outside of that, I've spent so much time on wide receiver, to be honest with you. I would be so stunned. Somebody said something today like they're going to take defense. I'm like, I just don't see it. Like, and I don't mean to sidetrack this and take this back onto the railroad tracks for the wide receiver train, but I just, you know, I was saying today, Stephon Diggs over the past 4 years led the league in targets, and Gabe Davis had 290 receptions since 2020. I just don't know how you go into this year with the only receiver who caught a pass from Josh Allen was Khalil Shakir, and he did it 39 times. I can't imagine them taking anything but a wide receiver. It just doesn't make sense to me. In this big old noggin of mine, I don't get it. But I there's a couple guys that I think would be great, but in terms of immediate impact, I just don't like. Could they go Kalen Bullock? Could they go,
Another one I like.
and really surprise us, with a cornerback? Yeah, sure. Like I've seen mocks where Nate Wiggins falls to 28. Would I love to have a rangy, super long, fast, you're supposed to run like a 4.29, but pull the hamstring. That'd be amazing. Like, is there a world where for some reason Quinion Mitchell falls and the Bills are like, he's so talented, let's just get him? Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like Ennis Rackstraw is a cornerback / safety. He's super intriguing. I think he's a guy that another plug and play player that would be very intriguing. Kool-Aid McKinstry, like you had mentioned, another guy. The other one that's be a lot of fun, I think it'd be a little early, but still, is Mike Sainstrel. He is more of a nickel corner, but he is a super talented cornerback. And if you want to play him against the next receiver, not so much the Y who's just a deep threat. I don't know. There's a lot of guys on, that you could really get really funky with and play an amoeba defense, which will let you go. And then I'll say my number one.
Oh, good, man. And I just want to say real fast, I love our comment section because there's just this is draft season in a nutshell. Everyone has such different perceptions of the team, and that's not a bad thing. Everyone views it in their own way, and I love it because I love seeing the discrepancy in one person's stance on what they should take at 28 or names they like, and the next person's. Like, for example, we have our viewer of the show, Charles G. Thank you for watching, Charles. Bills could pass on wide receiver at 28 and still get a Baker Malik Washington duo. Don't freak out. And I do agree with this sentiment. And then our buddy David says, I want them to move the heavens and the earth to get Romo Dunze. And these comments back to back are so perfect, and I appreciate it because I love seeing how everyone wants to construct the team. And I completely agree. If you are asking me my gut feeling of what actually happens on Thursday, it's receiver. And I didn't do this episode to just like try and act like I don't think that's a reality, but more just to make everyone aware of some other prospects or just to discuss some other prospects that people might like. Because listen, I don't want everyone to set their TVs on fire, to roam the streets naked in a fit of rage because they didn't take a wide receiver at 28. I want there to be at least an understanding that there are other needs on this team too, and that these options that we've listed are some of the ones that could be potential picks that would make sense, and I think fans could be excited about, like you said when Nate mentioned it on Rock Pile Report. Like, fans are going to eat it up. I do agree. I think if pick 28 was freaking Kool-Aid McKinstry, someone would actually like the fact that it's Kool-Aid McKinstry, or fans would warm up to it after some time, especially because we're talking about pick 28. We don't know how the rest of the draft's going to take shape. And more importantly, we don't know what the philosophy is on either side of the ball where their draft might reflect that. And therefore, we have to wait and see. So if they don't do it at 28, then so be it. Maybe they'll go later in the draft. But I do think it's realistic to say wide receiver is probably the most prioritizing, or I cannot talk tonight, the biggest priority. And for that reason, I'm cool with them going there. But these are just some other options. And some of my honorable mentions are Cooper DeJean, who I stated before. Again, safety, corner versatility, really just a Swiss Army man that you can plug into your defense. There's a lot of value in that. I think I just didn't put him on the list because I wanted the traditional corner over having someone that would fill in at corner and then fill in at safety. And really, like, is that gadget in-betweener style going to be something that ultimately hurts his value more than helps it? There was Nate Wiggins, who was also on this list for the same reasons you mentioned. Again, rangy, athletic, long arms, someone that, again, has that endless motor component to them, similar to like Terry and Arnold, similar to like William McKinstry, these first-round corners where they seem to have like a heat-seeking missile mentality, even in run defense, which I think they value a lot out of potential corners. And just, this is a guy that I could also see plugging into a Sean McDermott defense and doing quite well and alleviating a lot of those future corner concerns. And the last name I have on here, again, for honorable mentions, that's not a receiver, is Darius Robinson. Same reasons I listed kind of with DeJean, but for the defensive line. And I love Robinson. But I think, again, when you talk about someone that you're going to actually rotate in and move around and whatever, I think just if I'm talking about taking someone with the my first round pick. I might at this point, after thinking on it a bit more, rather go for the more dedicated position, and therefore Robinson wouldn't be my first choice, but someone that I would be fine with if they went for. But Thomas, number one favorite for 28 that is not a wide receiver.
So I kind of alluded to it at the end of what I was saying with playing an amoeba defense. And what I mean by that is for the Bills, I spoke earlier with Braden Fisk about, having versatility. And Sean McDermott loves versatility. So does Brandon Beane. So does his coaching staff. Versatility and positionless players are and will be the future of the Bills and, moreover, the NFL. So when I talk about an amoeba defense, it's a defense that in that secondary, they are just positionless. They move all over the place, and I know somebody had mentioned earlier about, does Quinion Mitchell, he plays more man defense. If you don't know, our new defensive backs coach, his primary focus is man defense. So don't be surprised if there is a bit of a shift in philosophy for the Buffalo Bills and how they play defense. But I would see a potential of that happening. And so my number one's Cooper DeJean. And I think would Sean McDermott be salivating at a guy like him. A guy that, if you look at size, 6 foot 203, perfect size, ran a 4.5 40, so good speed. He has really been just an absolute stud for that, Iowa team since they've been there. He's not the most athletic person, but he is incredibly smart. He's a guy that could step right in. I mentioned this with Tyler Nubin. This is a guy that can play anywhere, and for, if you guys remember Jason Sehorn, right? A guy that back in the day was a stud corner. You're talking about a guy that could be a stud number one corner, but also a stud number one safety. And having that versatility, like we saw 3 safety packages with Taylor Rapp on the field with Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer last year. Having Cooper DeJean on the field with Mike Edwards and Taylor Rapp, or being able to, have Sean McDermott, you saw with the disguised coverages, have a guy, the first white quarter. I'm not even gonna. I'm gonna try to. I had something going there, and I'm gonna completely throw myself off the tracks.
Sorry,
Sean McDermott loves disguising coverage. You saw it with Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. What better than a guy like Cooper DeJean to disguise coverage? Who can? Is he going to play safety this down? Is he going to play corner? He's like a switch. He's like, if you watch the Yankees, they've got Oswaldo Cabrera, who can literally switch hit. He's a right hitter and he's a lefty hitter. If you have Cooper DeJean on the field, he could be a corner or he could be a safety. And what a better way in an amoeba defense to have absolutely every offensive coordinator on their heels, because they don't know what or where he's going to be lining up and how he's going to be, deployed on the defense. I think he'd be fantastic. I think he'd be, a stud player for this, this team. And at the end of the day, like we've talked about, having that position versatility, you have a guy that if there's an injury can come off the bench and play in any position, anywhere. He even has the position flexibility if Tara Johnson comes off the field to come down and play nickel corner. He has the ability to play in the box like Jordan Poyer, be a deep ball safety like Micah Hyde. That is what you need on a team like the Bills, who love versatility in the secondary. I think he'd be fantastic. He has the potential to be like a Pro Bowl Hall of Fame level player with how good he is coming out of college. So, very few white corners. I know that's the big thing. He is a white corner. It doesn't happen
Chat's
too
going
often.
hard on this one right now, Thomas. It's big. It's
I know.
cracking me up.
I know it is. It's definitely a talking point, but hey, you know what? If you can get a guy that is just super, super talented, he was number 14 on Bruce Feldman's freaks list. Come on. That's a guy that you would love to be able to get in there.
I see the vision 100% for Cooper DeJean. I'm not anti-Cooper DeJean. I love him as a prospect. If the Bills did it at 28, I'm all for it. He's in my honorable mentions, which is basically 6, 7, and 8, right? Like, I get it. I love the idea of a rotational piece not just for coming in for a position, but being all over the field and moving him around. And just, again, you mentioned it, disguise coverage, being able to put him on and not know where he's going because he can play 4 different positions, right? Do you want him as your strong safety? Do you want him to play center fielder? Do you want him as a slot corner, outside corner? Do you want him as a linebacker? You know, there are a lot of different ways you can use him in this. Oh my goodness, chat, you're amazing. I love you all. Thank you. But like the ability to keep a defense on its heels, and when you talk about, and you've mentioned amoeba defense, and I agree with that concept, it all makes perfect sense. I think McDermott would value it. I don't think there's a breath I would like in less than a breath they would run to the podium and put his name down if he was there at 28 and there wasn't like a can't miss wide receiver there. I completely get it. I think why I just didn't put him on this list again, I'll keep saying it, is just the chess piece element is there. And I think when you see how much this team values Cam Lewis enough to keep bringing him back, it would be like tenfold with Cooper DeJean, right? Because you're getting essentially the prospect of a higher caliber version of what Cam Lewis is, where you are able to plug him into all of those positions, however, get him playing at a high level. But then you have to kind of ask yourself, all right, I have Cooper DeJean, I draft him. Can Cooper DeJean play at a high level at every single position we ask him to do? Because you got to remember, you have a young kid coming into your defense, having to learn a playbook, all the calls, all the coverages, but then having to learn that at multiple positions and also have to be able to do it well. You've seen the steep learning curve that exists for just a corner. I mean, look at Kyer Elam, who I still think is developing, still could be very good. I am not out on Kyer Elam, but it's very clear that there was a learning curve for him that he's still getting accustomed to. I think the question you have to ask yourself if you're looking at Cooper DeJean is, are you going to have him play multiple positions? And if you are, do you trust that he could develop to play these multiple positions well enough to not have any drop off at the position where it only ends up pushing him more and more into one role where maybe he's a jack of the trade, but not a master of any of them? And then if he gets pushed into that one role, how is he going to do in that one role? And was it worth taking him in the first round? I think that's where my reservations lie with him. So while I'm not anti Cooper DeJean and I see the vision, I think there's a lot of ifs in the statement of development with him where I would be more comfortable just going for a conventional corner, like, and he has played corner, but really like a Wiggins, a McKinstry, if he somehow fell, Arnold, which I don't think he will, like those guys over DeJean. But my number one, it's pretty obvious. I've said it, and I'm going to say it again. I said it last week. It's JPJ. And I think, again, when we talk about who you value when it's not a receiver, you got to look at, I think, what is the most important position that would be available, realistic. I know JPJ's been mocked anywhere from the late teens to second round. There's a really weird spread on his valuation, which is why I put him on this list. JPJ, to me, is the one if he's there and you're talking about him versus, let's say, the best receiver on the board is like Troy Franklin, I'm taking JPJ. You lost Mitch Morse. You need to replace that void. You are talking about a guy that could literally provide you stability in front of Josh Allen for maybe not only just the duration of his rookie contract, but for the next 10 years. He has versatility, and I know that there's the ability to kick him over to guard or even out wide if you needed to, but center is where I would envision him going. I think this just is a rising tide that lifts all boats in a good way. You have him play center. You have McGovern kick back over to guard, play in the role that he was doing well. You have David Edwards still here, but he could rotate in as opposed to being a starter, even though I don't think he'll be a bad starter. JPJ, to me, is the answer for a lot of questions that surround this Buffalo Bills offensive line. I think he's a nasty, freak downhill run blocker. I think he's great in pass pro with a good anchor, even though there's concerns about how he uses his hands, pad level, and his arms. I think that he really can maintain an NFL quality level of blocking that will only get better in time, especially when Aaron Cromer is the one that's behind the scenes trying to develop him. This to me is, if it's not receiver, it's him. This is protection for Josh Allen. He's a rookie. There will be a question because he is a rookie draft pick, and you have to have questions with a rookie draft pick. But if you're asking me who I am the most confident could develop into a high caliber NFL starting center, it's JPJ, no question. I think this is a guy that would be a home run pick if it can't be receiver at this spot, and someone that I'd be pounding the table for in Detroit live if he is there on the board at 28, and the next best option is a receiver that feels far more like a rotational piece than someone you could trust to be an alpha starter in this offense. So JPJ is my number one. Thomas, That was a fun discussion. I had a blast talking about all of these different prospects. I almost said receivers. That would have been a great way to cap the episode off, but that is not what we're doing. But chat, I see that we still somehow stumbled into conversation about receivers anyway. And there is
can I say one thing?
Go for it.
McConkey is not scrawny. McConkey is literally the exact same size as Stephon Diggs. Literally the exact same size as Stephon Diggs. And no one ever has said Stephon Diggs is scrawny. I don't know where people come up with this stuff. Guys, I implore you, Twitter is not everything. Go do some research when you're looking at people. If you type in the Google machine, you can look up their combine results, which is an official medical, like literal check on them. It will tell you their exact size. Ladd McConkey is not a small guy. And in fact, Ladd McConkey is also not just a slot receiver, which is something that I've literally had to fight off multiple times. But go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry.
No, it's all good, man. And Charles, I just think JPJ is the better prospect. I think he's better than all these other prospects. I like Haynes a lot. I really do. But JPJ to me is the top, like, surefire interior offensive line prospect. I think there's just so much upside with him, but he feels like he is the most pro ready. But I'll say this too. As far as the receiver discourse, because even though this episode was not supposed to be about them, I'm making it about receivers real fast. I just want everyone, it had to happen at some point, right? We're about to it's draft eve, right? Like, or eve, because it's Tuesday. So, I mean, we're talking about what we think is the most realistic. I'm going a bit off script here, but one thing I will say to our chat and for everyone to look into is I think the Bills are going to value separators. And you made this point, Thomas. I saw you tweet about this, and it's something that a sentiment I've shared with you for a while. They value separators more than they value size. And I'm not saying that size will not matter, because size is great. It all depends on how you use it, guys. But size matters. Separation to me matters a bit more. Because when we're talking about who Josh Allen has thrown to in his career and what he is used to in this offense, it is receivers that can get themselves open with their feet, with their route running, with their savviness. Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley, John Brown, who was a bit of a speedster, but also a good route runner. Emmanuel Sanders. Now, Gabe Davis, consistently getting open was an issue, but when he did, it was usually downhill balls and he would get a step on his defender and he'd be able to make the play. This is what I think they are going to really be attacking in the receiver room. And when you look at some of the options that are there for them at 28, I think that level of separation that these receivers can provide you could be there also at 60 and later in the draft. And I'm really glad, I think Charles mentioned Malik Washington, because this is a great example of someone that I feel like the fan base would be kind of pissed if we took him. I wouldn't be, because he might be 5'7". This dude is one of the best separators in the class. He's a monster. He's got great vertical speed. He's got great ball tracking. Like, I promise you, this is the type of receiver that I think the Bills could be going for, where they might not be trying to build a room of giants, but rather a room of guys that are just capable of getting that step on their defender and getting themselves open. So I want to go on that rant, but Thomas, I will ask you this.
Go.
No,
we say
good,
that they're gonna look for separators, and then they're gonna go ahead and take like Keon Coleman and Cornelius Johnson and completely throw us to the.
If that happens, guys, I will eat crow next week on this show. I will be like, I didn't think they were going to do it. I will wear it. You know me. If I'm wrong, I'm happy to admit I'm wrong, because it's okay to be wrong. You don't have to be right all the time. No one is. But Thomas, in the wake of the draft, we are headed out there in just a few days. Do you have any final thoughts, predictions, anything you want to say in advance of this event?
Well, aside from, I hope you guys tune in to all the Cover One coverage. We are going to be live Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Thursday nights, the air raid hour. Friday night, it's Anthony Prohaska. And then Saturday is going to be, I think it's David and Uber are going to be handling Saturday. So definitely tap in, and then obviously follow along with myself, Joe, and John Helmkamp, as we are going to be providing you all sorts of in-depth updates and interviews and everything we can from Detroit. But what I will say is I have this there's a tweet that came out from Mike Silver. I'm going to bring it up real quick. Mike Silver tweeted out about Brandon Ayuk. And I thought it really interesting because he had mentioned, and this was the tweet, I'm going to read this verbatim for you guys. There is a sense among other high-ranking personnel executives around the league that Ayuk, as one executive put it, is available for the right price. to this point, the 49ers have asked for a 2024 first-round pick. They want too much, said the executive, whose team is in the market for a receiver, which I think could be Brandon Beane. But I think Brandon Beane, I've a lot of people are like, oh, they're going to take one at 28. I really wonder, and Aaron Quinn, I can't talk. Aaron Quinn said in the Cover One staff chat that he thinks potentially the class has been inflated because of the top 3 to make it look better than it truly is. And it is a deep class, but I do think there's something to be said for, did the top 3 make the rest of them look way better? Would this class, if the top 3 was not around, would this class look as good as it does if they weren't there and it was just the rest? I don't think so. So I wonder, in terms of that, does Brandon Beane see, I mean, maybe Brian Thomas Jr. is up there with the rest of them. I wonder, is this a scenario where, a Roma Dunze, right? Like Mike Florio, who Mike Florio's never right about anything, so I don't take his mock draft for more than what it is. But is this a year that Brandon Beane pulls off that massive trade for a receiver? I just have this weird feeling that he is going to attack this draft and attack it hard. He wanted a receiver back when Stephon Diggs here, and I know he said in that press conference that Josh Allen needed one early on. He doesn't know if he really needs one now. Brandon Beane's a liar. I'm sorry. I don't take a lot of what he says for more than what it is, because he has to keep other GMs honest. And if he tells you everything he's going to do, they're going to make it 10 times harder for him to get up the draft board. So I really, really, really think, in my heart of hearts, I think Brandon Beane trades up. And I don't know if it's just a couple. I think there's a world where Brandon Beane gets aggressive in his antsy, as he calls himself, could be the proponent to him going after one of these guys. And I'll tell you, if one of them gets to 9, 10, 11, 12 in that striking distance, watch out.
I think I keep going back to 9 just because it's right before the Jets pick, and I don't think they would ever want to live in a world where they waited and then the Jets took a receiver they'd want to take. I can see a trade up happening. I really can, because I think with that in mind, it's, if he really loves the prospect, I don't think Beane is shy about making it happen. I think getting rid of Stephon Diggs, sending him to Houston, getting a second back for that's just crazy in general to me. I didn't think they were actually going to get a second for it, but
sure,
pulling that trade off and then leaving the room the way it is, something's up. Now, I don't know if that's going to be a trade up in the draft. What I really do think is the situation's fluid, in that I'm sure they are entertaining the idea of the board dropping a certain way and them seeing maybe at pick even number 8, there's Neighbors and Odunze somehow still on the board and they want either one, to which I think Beane would be pounding the phone and trying to get up there. But I also think that it's more of all the pads are open. You're seeing, connections, whispers about like the Bills maybe being interested in trading up. And then you hear whispers about the Bills being in on receiver, this guy and this guy and this guy. I think that is all one of those examples of where there's smoke, there's fire, not in the sense that there's one concrete answer, but rather that Beane is probably just looking for a freaking receiver, man. I think the common denominator here is that the Buffalo Bills will walk away from this class for better, for worse, whether it's by trading, whether it's by trading up. And this is the most like smooth brain statement. Like, this is so obvious. I'm not trying to make a point here, but I really just think that it's going to be 2 receiver minimum from this class. It's going to be 2. They're going to have 2. They have to round the room out. There are more prospects they need, but I am just I'm very confident that I don't even think Beane has a solid answer of what he's going to do yet, as much as he has multiple scenarios written down. If X happens, I go for Y. If Y happens, I go for Z. And it's just going to keep on being that until the decision has to happen, into which if Odunze is there at 9, I think that is the first possible move he could make. And then if Odunze passes 9, they decide to let the Jets pick. The Jets don't take him somehow by the grace of God, and Florio's draft actually works out where he makes it to Denver's pick and we trade with them. I will be the happiest clam on planet Earth. Promise you that. But I think that receiver being the first overall pick, being the focal point of their draft, this is really what I was trying to say before I rambled, is the narrative. This is, in my eyes, the most likely scenario. But tonight's episode still wanted to share some other prospects. So, Thomas, thank you so much for being here, man. I really appreciate you taking the time. It was short notice. This episode was originally going to just be a mock draft, but then I was like, I kind of want to do this instead. So then I asked Thomas and John like super last minute yesterday, and Thomas is here, so I appreciate it, man. Let the people know what you got going on, where they can find you, as always.
Well, I'm going to be in Detroit. So yeah, if you don't know who I am, which God bless you, I probably for the better. My name is Thomas DeLoss. You can find me on Twitter at the Thomas DeLoss. I host the show Buffalo Late Night every Thursday at 7 p.m. And we do all sorts of shenanigans. That's my brother right there, Ian BLN. He's the producer for the show. But myself, Joe, and John will be in Detroit. I'm going to be driving there from Rochester. So I'll be leaving Thursday morning to get to Detroit. But yeah, I'll tell you, I appreciate all the engagement recently from you guys. This has been, and I truly believe this, one of the more exciting and interesting off seasons leading up to a draft in a very long time, engagement wise, just internally with the amount of conversation, fans getting involved with the topics at hand. So, like I said, guys, give us a follow if you haven't already. We're excited to interact with you guys this coming next couple days. And if any of you are at the draft in Detroit, please come up and say hello.
Yeah, Thomas doesn't bite. But
not intentionally.
Yes, we will be there in a few days, folks. It's going to be a lot of fun. This is an unprecedented thing for, honestly, all of us, because I don't think any of us have gone to this event yet. And I'm really looking forward to working with Thomas, John, Ian, and just getting out there and really getting our boots in the ground and seeing what the event's like. We're going to have a few setups. We're going to try and get around, maybe get some interviews. A lot of cool stuff that we have in store. So really looking forward to it. Please check out the Cover One Twitter handle, as well as all of our own personal handles again, at @show_DeRosa, at the Thomas DeLoss, and at John Helmkamp, because thus three are going to be active, and you should keep up with everything we're doing to cover the Bills draft. But for me, again, every Tuesday night, 7:30 p.m., I am here live under review. I appreciate all of you so much for tuning into this week's episode. If you haven't yet, please do me a favor, drop a like on this video, throw a share if you have a Bills fan friend who wants to find some new content. Really do appreciate all of you guys being here and giving this show, just any sort of viewership. It really does mean the world. And if you listen to us after the fact, please rate the podcast 5 stars if you like what you heard. Again, hopefully my audio is better in this episode. If it isn't and I ruined your eardrums, that is totally on me. I welcome DMs to just call me out on my loud-ass voice and poor mic adjustment volume. But everybody, I'll be back next week, 7:30 p.m., to review the future. Well, at the time, it'll be past, but new. Bills draft class, where we will talk about all of our new players, our shiny new toys, and what that roster is going to look like. So everybody, have some fun. Let's see how this draft plays out. And as always, go Bills. We will see you next week. Well, actually, we'll see you on Thursday. Take care, everybody.
Go Bills.